I have been asked, how did you come to write about Nakia? It begins with the picture. Now, this piece of bas relief was excavated in the 19th century in what is now Iraq. It has a title, Nakia Zakutu, with her son Esarhaddon, or grandson Ashurbanipal. In an inscription, you can read the words of the vow that all magnates must take when a king or heir apparent is crowned. And if you from this day on hear an ugly word of rebellion and insurrection being spoken against your lord Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria, you shall come and inform Zakutu his mother, and Ashurbanipal, king of Assyria, your lord. Obviously, the queen mother is of prime importance, so I wanted to know more of her. To the scholarly world, her origins were uncertain, but her name, Nakia, suggests a West Semitic origin or a Chaldean origin. So I began to think up a story for him. One of my favorite pictures is sometimes titled Ashurbanipal and his wife in their pleasure garden. I've used it for the cover of the book, but I am quite certain that it is not Ashurbanipal's wife in that picture, but his grandmother, Zakutu, my Nakia. Here's a picture of Libani Sharat, Ashurbanipal's wife. Of course, the bas-reliefs are worn, but the face of the woman in the garden with the king looks far more like the face we know as Nakia than the face we know is the king's wife. Whatever. But let's suppose that it is. Why would the king be hanging out with his grandmother? Thereby hangs a tale, and it is the story I'm telling. If you look up Mesopotamian bas-relief in the Britannica or Wikipedia, you get a discussion of it as art. They talk about periods, times when the scenes portrayed were ceremonial, like the one of Nathkia and Esarhaddon, or where the king or other high priestly persons are shown paying homage to various deities. I quote, in the 7th century palaces of Sennacherib and Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, the reliefs suggest a reaction in favor of narrative and violent activity. The slabs are covered to their full height by complicated battle scenes, in which the progress of the fighting is suggested by episodic repetition. Types of landscape are depicted schematically, and significant episodes or individuals are identified by a short inscription, without impairing the overall rhythm of the design. But battle wasn't the only thing. In the intervals between their military campaigns, Assyrian kings appear to have been much preoccupied with hunting, and scenes from the chase provide another subject for the reliefs. Lions hunted with spears from a light chariot, and herds of wild asses or gazelles are subjects that stimulated the imagination and sensibility of the Assyrian artist. Yet, there was such an extraordinary flowering of these sculptural pieces during the reigns that Nakia influenced. All the types were found in the palaces built by her husband, son, and grandson. It was, after all, the high point of Ashur's power and prosperity. So many of the panels depict scenes of ordinary life that I have made up Nakia's story to encompass many of the events depicted in the reliefs. I imagined her as part of the booty paid by the king of Judah to Sennacherib. I imagined her hardship on the journey, including a raid on the caravan by Arabs. I imagined her at a remote village along the caravan route. Coming from the western end of the empire, she will have wondered at the different architecture and forms of transport, as much as at the clothing and the class system. Ashur was very grand and quite urbanized, proud of its high culture and massive walls and buildings. Related to that was the sophistication of the religion. I have imagined, not without archaeological evidence, that the religion of the country she came to was quite different from the one she left. I have imagined her being devoted to the goddess, to Ishtar, who dominated the religious and political life of the empire during Nakia's lifetime. Ishtar, inhabiting the seventh heaven, was understood as the principal avatar of the godhead. She was the guarantor of all civilization, the guardian of each city. The Queen Mother's crown, as you see, is the walls of the city. She represents the city as an actor on the divine stage. Naturally, Nakia had to adapt to a different political system. I've imagined her as very young to begin with, eager for learning and understanding, and she is a heroine after all, very beautiful. But no life is without turmoil, so in this story, Zakutu suffers. Personal tragedy affects her, and she needs to seek out Gula, goddess of healing, and to undergo exorcism. She leaves in the carvings such experiences. In her time, the religious life saw the meeting and merging of an indigenous panoply of gods and goddesses with the age-old Babylonian practices and stories. Almost all we know of that place and time comes from Ashurbanipal's library. Inscribed on clay tablets, the king accumulated a huge archive. We have commercial documents, treaties, religious myths, stories of heroes and of the gods, and letters of officials to and from one another as part of daily life. So, reading this book, you enter a time and place.